Today's video is sponsored by Call to Adventure Epic Origins. Call to Adventure Epic Origins is a new board game designed for people who love fantasy storytelling and RPGs. In Call to Adventure, you'll use cards to build your character. New cards add to your ability runes, which you roll like dice when facing challenges. Players team up to take on a big bad adversary, but are also competing with each other to earn the highest destiny score. At the end of the game, your player board shows more than your score. It tells a story. Coming up with D&D backstories can be hard. While Call to Adventure is a great game on its own, it's also a really unique way to create characters for D&D. The game includes over 150 inspiring illustrations, and every card can help you build a compelling backstory. The game even includes a guide for converting your final board into a 5th edition character. Look at me in all my D&D glory. Call to Adventure Epic Origins is on Kickstarter until December 2nd, and will be coming to stores in summer 2022. And now what you're here for. Romance-obsessed player thinks she's entitled to my straight character sword. Not safe for work. Hi everyone, All Things D&D is back with another story. I always thought D&D was about fighting monsters, becoming heroes, finding treasure, and having a great time with friends. Who are these people that insist on bringing in their private, stuff to the gaming table? Please, listen. Stop it. No one likes it. If this is you, seriously, cut it out. Unless that's exactly the kind of game you're in and/or running, knock it off. The cast includes me, yours truly, playing a straight human cleric. Problem player, playing a gay half-elf bard. DM, you know the drill, plus his DM NPC, a bi-pan-human warlock bard. Both players, myself and the other player, are women, which I fear is important to know here. Also, she and the DM have been friends for over a decade, which might be the reason this went on and on for as long as it has. So let's get into it. The campaign is set in your typical high fantasy setting, and most of the core group meets up in a tavern. The group dynamic is great. There's some RP happening right off the bat, and we're having a fun time, getting into our first mystery to solve in the town we're staying in. By now, it's become clear that my cleric and the bard are the only male members of the party. And since the bard is your typical pretty, arrogant, very, very gay bard, he starts hitting on my cleric immediately. Now, my cleric is not only straight as an arrow, but also a recent widower. He lost his wife maybe 6 weeks ago, and is very obviously not in a place to deal with it. He's refusing to sleep. He hasn't bathed in a while. He's often absent-minded. Despite all that, the bard continues to go after him. He doesn't seem to want to engage with the plot at all, and my personal highlight of that first session is player B asking to make an insight check to see if the cleric is gay. After the first few sessions, the player contacts me to ask about my character. I thought it was genuine interest and happily answered her. She voiced that she'd like a romance for her character, and was wondering what my character's sexuality really was, and if there was a chance for them to be together. I answered truthfully that I didn't design him to have a romance in-game, as he had already had a wife, and a son, for that matter, and his story was about healing, hence the cleric, and moving on. But there was no harm in being a little flirty around him, right? It seemed fun at first. The others enjoyed their typical bard and his fun side quest, so I said sure. My character was pretty oblivious to romance, since he hasn't had a date in a long time, and since he grew up very sheltered, he was completely new to any other sexual orientation besides his own. So these two became a running gag of the campaign. We all knew it wasn't going to happen, except the other player really wanted it to. She demanded it would. She had commissions drawn of both of them together. She wrote sexual stories about them. She would ask about my character's kinks, his previous sex life, and constantly beg to talk about the pairing. After every session, she would whine about how despite me telling her it was okay that the bard flirted with him, my character didn't engage in it at all, and how she thought they were headed for a romance. In all fairness, I indulged her, because I still thought it was really cool how interested she was in my character's development, and I enjoyed talking about him. I wrote stories too, though not with the same explicit content, and made art. After I had told her that no, the cleric would probably not have a relationship with the bard right off the bat, but if they were to ever date, it would be the slowest slow burn romance in the history of slow burn, she was thrilled. Only to yell at me after the very next session how my character was still not flirting back, and how I disappointed her, and am massively ruining her fun. Probably the biggest red flag waved in my face right then, but again, I was oblivious to it and ended up explaining the character concept again and apologizing that it would take time, both for my character to work through his grief and to discover a different sexuality than he believed he had. The story went on. The others were still fun to RP with, and the bard seemed to not be as flirty with the cleric as he was in the beginning, so they actually became friends somewhat. Enter the warlock/bard, where things go downhill fast. So this DM NPC was an important character from another player's background, and connected to another one as well. He traveled with the party for a while, and it turns out that he was pretty similar in nature to the bard. He was hitting on pretty much anyone. He was maybe even more arrogant than the bard, as pretty as he was, and well, also partly a bard. To say that the other player hated this character's guts is an understatement. With another man in the party, there were a lot of RP moments between just the three of us, where the bard would constantly try to mark his territory and all the flirty behavior from the beginning came back. But worse, he would brag about having known my character longer and being friends with him, and how he had tried everything before and it didn't work, so the warlock shouldn't bother. Now, imagine the player's outrage when my character actually formed a really close bond with the DM NPC. The difference was that both the DM and I knew there wasn't any romance happening ever, and this DM NPC's flirting was a quirk, not his entire personality. He actually had characteristics that didn't revolve around his sexuality, and that was the polar opposite of my cleric's, which gave me a great chance at developing my character more, as he challenged his morals, his perception of the world, and most importantly, his grief. The bard, on the other side, had never even bothered to ask my cleric about his wife. When the party was staying in another tavern, they split into two rooms, one for the ladies, one for the men, and the men's room only had 2 beds. Cheap, I know, but genuinely fun back then. The bard, of course, insisted that the cleric share a bed with him, despite him immediately offering to sleep on the ground. It went on, with the bard becoming increasingly more irritated, and almost ordering my character around, claiming that there's only one sensible choice here, until I've finally had enough. I described how my character went over to the warlock's bed, and the whole group was dying from laughter. Now, this was also one of the first sessions we played live, so I sat right next to that player when this happened, and I still haven't forgotten the way she stared at me. Afterwards, back to online sessions and chatting again, all hell broke loose. She went off on me about how I had betrayed her, how I told her my character wasn't into men. Why on earth is he so close to the DM NPC after all the work she had put in, and how dare I? This was the first time I started to really realize how much B had frustrated me with her vision of her beloved pairing. And I wish I could give you a happy ending to this, but the truth is that the game went on, with me mostly focusing on the stuff I enjoyed, and trying to ignore the stuff I didn't. There were still moments where that player would throw a fit, when my character and the DM NPC had solo RP moments, and in the end, after approaching the DM with this issue, he decided to give her the romance she so desired, through an NPC specifically for that purpose. Now a quarter of our playtime was dedicated to that player living her romance fantasy, including fully RP'd date nights, and B would pick up writing and commissioning art again. The game didn't last that much longer after that, but we would continue to play other campaigns together, mostly because she was a package deal with other people I cared about. She was definitely the worst problem player I ever had to deal with, and in hindsight, this first experience in a game with her wasn't even the worst thing she would do, but it was the creepiest for sure. Oh, except for that one time in my campaign where she wanted me to play out a pedophile grooming relationship between a 30-ish old man and her 15-year-old character. Because, love, I guess? Whereas it turns out she didn't even intend for this man to be a pedophile, despite writing in his backstory that he was physically attracted to a young boy, and regrets not showing him the ropes. But that's a story for another time. Until then, on behalf of the entire community, gross! I'm sure there are better avenues for people to live out these specific, fantasies. But the D&D table sure as heck isn't the right place for it. Keep that in the dark parts of Discord. Seriously, I need a shower. Please let us know what you think and comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, All Things D&D. Our videos are posted every Tuesday and Friday, so stay tuned for more amazing Dungeons & Dragons content.